talked a few weeks ago. Right off the hop, I want to say congrats. Your company, Managing Life, won a People's Choice Award at the InsurTech North event in the last several weeks. So congrats on the recent accomplishment. Well done. And I know we'll get a chance to talk about that in our discussion today. So I'm talking to Tahir Janmohamed. You're the founder and CEO of Managing Life. And we're just two guys with nothing better to do on a Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern.
After the kids have gone to bed, right?
After the kids have gone to bed, to talk about insurance, right? What other, I can't think of a better topic that's more exciting. Like, there's nothing on TV that compares to this, or on social media, right?
This is the most exciting topic, of course.
Of course it is, right? Because we all plan to get into this industry when we were growing up and going to school and had the world in front of us. So you mentioned kids. How many have you got under your roof at the moment?
I've got two young boys, 5 and 7. So they've been homeschooling for what seems like 8 years now. It's been a long year, but it's been nice in some ways to have them at home, and it's been a very unique year. I'll leave it at that. Unique is the right word.
Yeah, and it's hats off. Shout out to the teachers out there. My wife is a teacher. I've got 4 myself, but and they're in various ages from 5 to almost 14. But I would say the age of your kids, 5 to 7, that's really challenging, because especially the 5-year-old, it's still play-based discovery type learning. And that's really hard to do virtually. I don't think it can really be done effectively virtually. And that's not a knock on the school system or the technology or even the efforts of our educators to do the best considering the current circumstances. But for the sake of our kids, especially the 5-year-olds and the 7-year-olds out there, they need to start interacting again and get back into the classroom. So here's hoping that happens sooner than later.
For sure, without a doubt. I mean, hats off. You said it best. It is really hard to teach this age group virtually, and they've been doing a phenomenal job with, the situation. But kids are especially at this age are meant to be together, and they're meant to play and run around. And so, we're all looking forward to when that can happen again. But they're doing the best that they can, and they've done a great job of that so far.
Yeah. And so as far as you're concerned, we were talking a little bit before we turned the recorder on about the work situation, and everyone's had to adapt to a certain extent. I don't want to talk about the pandemic, but I found it interesting when you talked about where you're situated normally before all of this craziness happened. Talk a little bit about your office space. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, for sure. So when I first went down this path, I was based at a Mars Innovation Center. We then moved to the Ryerson DMZ, which is at Yonge and Dundas. And then after that, we moved to the Ryerson Biomedical Zone. So that's located at the Li Ka-shing Institute at St. Michael's Hospital, which is now Unity Health. So it was a fantastic accelerator. It was a co-working space alongside, I think there was like 8 or 9 different healthcare companies there. We all had a similar vision and passion for wanting to help people. So it was very nice to be around like-minded companies. Fast forward to the pandemic, though, they turned the bottom floor of our building into a COVID assessment center. So it's been shut down since March of last year. And to be honest, I don't think we're going to return back to that location. Yeah,
but, cool experience while it lasted, I'm sure. And, what a great institution to be, kind of around, St. Michael's, and, just kind of like, the heart of healthcare, so to speak, right? And around other companies that are focused on the same thing. I think that's really unique. So I'm sure that was a great experience that introduced a lot of new opportunities. So, in your, I always like to get into a little bit about, on the founder's journey. There's the company can take up all of our waking hours. But we all need to stay level and balanced outside of, trying to launch a startup and make it work. What do you do when you're not focused on your company? How do you distract the mind?
Yeah, I'm finding, especially now, because there is no physical separation between work and home. It's all just a big blend.
Yeah.
You have to be very deliberate about separating work and taking time to not think about work. And that's been particularly hard. My escape, to be honest, is hockey. I'm a diehard Oiler fan. So
Nice.
I watch all 82 games every season. Been doing that for 20 years or so. This has been a particularly good season.
Yeah.
But prior to the pandemic, I used to practice kung fu.
Okay.
Bike a lot, just trying to get outside and do something physical, and that gets your mind off the computer. I want to turn off the laptop. Essentially, that's what I want to do.
100%.
Anything that lets me turn off the laptop.
Yeah, yeah, and because I was talking to a friend of mine and a client the other night about founders fatigue, and the irony of that conversation was I think we were talking past 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, well, maybe the first step towards recovery is that we stop having calls at 10 o'clock at night for both of our sakes, right? But like it's hard because you're passionate about your cause and why you're doing what you're doing. Especially, jumping into, the insurance market, which is just absolutely crazy because like there's so much opportunity, but it's not an easy market to break into, especially for outsiders and, even for insiders. And to avoid that founder's fatigue, you got to have something outside of work. And sometimes you got to force it at first. And it's different for everybody, but I think that is, and the reason I like to talk about this kind of stuff in this format, for those out there listening that are other founders can learn from each other. And just hearing that reinforcing, you've got to, I think you said, just be intentional about it or almost force it and structure it. And stick to it. Don't miss it like you would a pitch meeting. You wouldn't miss a pitch meeting. So, right. Don't miss that time with yourself. So, thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Martial arts, Kung Fu. That's pretty cool. How high up did you get?
Well, Kung Fu is a little bit different. There's no belt system in Kung Fu.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So we would just practice, I think it was 3 years. And then just nothing for the past year, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wish I could be a better example of being able to take time out away from work. I think I should do a better job of it, but I think it's just been ingrained in me because when I first got started on this, I was a management consultant for 8 years at IBM. And so management consulting is a pretty intense career choice nonetheless. Yeah. But I started managing life while I was still a full-time consultant. So I'd, work until 8, 9 p.m. on consulting, come home, eat, and then work on managing life until 3, 4 in the morning, kind of build it on the side of my desk until it got to a point where I couldn't do both. And, we had a very long, intense conversation about what was the right path forward for me. So it took 4 years of that before I finally made the jump and I left IBM though.
I was going to say this interview is about you. Yeah. But your last sentence there, I felt like you were just talking to me because what you just described is what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years.
Really?
Yeah. And so, that's just like right there, the value. If you're a founder out there and you're not talking to other founders, find an outlet. Because there's more people out there that have things in common with you that have been down the path than you realize. And you and I we didn't plan this. We didn't set this up this way. It just came out organically. But 100%, you just described my routine for the last 2.5 years. So
it's not sustainable. It is definitely not sustainable.
No, it's not. And you got to break it before it breaks you. Really, sure. And I've had those moments where I've had to step in on myself, and sometimes, and thank God, you want to catch it before it becomes starts to affect your health or your personal life or anything like that. So I think those are just important things to hear. We could probably do a whole other segment on that, and I might actually assemble a panel around it just to hear what other people are doing and what's worked for them. On the
I did like what you said though about talking to other founders, because some of my most enjoyable conversations, and why I liked being based out of the biomedical zone at St. Mike's, for example, was because I could talk to other founders.
Yeah.
There's very few people that kind of relate to the journey of a startup founder other than other founders, and you can learn from them. You can share ideas and experiences. You can vent. And it's like therapy for startup founders. So I think it's important. And I think that is something I definitely miss is, we used to go out for drinks once a month, kind of as, just founders and just sharing ideas. And I think that's a really important thing, is that sense of community with others.
100%. And like, it gets lonely, right? And it's hard to relate to someone who hasn't been through it. And I guarantee you, there's someone, whatever you're going through right now as a founder, there's someone else that's already been through that and down that path. And
for sure.
And maybe they failed miserably, but they can help you learn from that experience. And my experience has been others that have been down that path want to help other founders avoid the same pitfalls.
For sure.
So build that network up, and it doesn't even have to be people that do what you do. And I make a point of doing that even through this platform to introduce founders to each other in unrelated industries, and sometimes even competitors even end up talking to each other. It's really interesting how that works, right? And I think one thing that's common amongst entrepreneurs is they want other entrepreneurs to do well.
Yes.
And so that's a different mindset, even when they're competitors. It's not like the old Coke Pepsi wars, where they used to go out and smash each other's machines and stuff like that. Competition is good, and don't get me wrong, I'm not naive. We all want to be number one, but I think there's just something different amongst founders and entrepreneurs when it comes to that. So to get into some of the meat, I find everybody's something interesting about everybody's journey, but some things that stand out, and then I'll let you tell it in your own words. But starting at IBM, and you came from like outside, if you will, like not working directly for a carrier. And correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, that's right. Yeah.
And then you're somehow in this chronic pain management space.
Yeah.
And there's got to be something there that drove you or attracted you to that. And I know a bit about your story, but I'm going to let you talk about, the origins of managing life and what kind of motivated you to go down that path and start it.
Sure. So I didn't go out trying to build an insurtech company. We kind of just stumbled on the fact that insurance is just the best customer for what we do. But it was really my time at IBM that I realized that it wasn't the right career for me in a long-term perspective. And I think I had a fantastic career there. I learned a ton. It was fantastic. I learned about the industry. I was predominantly focused on financial services, so I did have exposure to a lot of insurers and banks and things like that. But what I was really working on at IBM was consulting or advising customers on how they could use technology and data to make better business decisions. And I remember there was a specific moment when it was kind of my trigger for leaving. I was at a large bank in downtown Toronto, and we were talking to, I think it was the CIO at that time, and we were talking about how we could leverage all these different disparate data sources that they had, their social media inquiries, their customer support, financial transactions. We could run it through this fancy AI module. And it was such a novel idea and innovative concept. But the outcome of what they were trying to do was show the right credit card offer when you logged into online banking. And I thought that was just such a letdown of opportunity. And so it was at that moment where I thought, okay, we can use data, but I personally want to do it to help people. And I know that sounds cliche, but there's no better way to help people than in the sphere of healthcare. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be able to use my background, my expertise, which was data and tech, in the best possible way. And so I felt like there was a big opportunity in the world of chronic pain. So I've had some experiences personally in my life with people who have chronic pain. So my mom has fibromyalgia, and I've kind of seen what the struggles are for people with chronic pain. it's really hard to explain what you're going through when you have chronic pain. There's no blood test for pain. There's no x-ray for pain. It's very invisible. So I constantly heard, you just don't get what I'm going through, when she would go to her doctors or even to my dad.
Yeah.
And I thought, if there was a better way that I could bring data to that conversation from, my mom's perspective, or the millions of people like her who have chronic pain, where they can actually say, this is what I'm going through, and have data tell their story for them. And on the flip side, for those that are trying to help them, give them the right data to make better treatment decisions. And I did a lot of research, and I found out that there was no app essentially for people to record chronic pain and communicate it. And so in 2011, I had the idea. It was actually 3 weeks before I was about to be married. And I had this idea and just prototyped it, and I just whipped it out in 3 months. And it was the very first version, and we were the very first pain app on Android back in 2011. And yeah, it was a long journey. And then, we would have a ton of downloads and great feedback. And so we'd invest a little bit more and iterate it and improve features and add to it. And we kept doing this year over year until, we would hit our next milestone, 5,000 downloads, 10,000 downloads.
Right.
And then my wife said to me, she said, if you reach 75,000 downloads, you can't do this on the side of your desk anymore. There's a real need here. You got to run with it. Mm-hmm. And so 8 months after I hit 75,000 downloads is when I left IBM. It took a long time. It was a very scary leap of faith, of course.
Sounds like the women in your life have had a strong positive influence on you. Your mother struggling with fibromyalgia and understanding what chronic pain is about from a personal experience, and then your wife giving you the nudge that, hey, this is more than a side of the desk project. You need to push it to the front. So, and that's another lesson here, right? Is to have a board of directors in your life. Advisors that don't necessarily have to be like a formal board of directors, but people in your life that see your potential and believe in you and what you're doing, and to take those inputs. Some of them aren't always going to be supportive either. Some of them will think what you're doing is crazy and you should take the safe route. You'll hear a lot of that. But that's a pretty cool story you just shared. So, you took that leap of faith now. First pain app in 2011 on Android. 2014, if I'm correct, is when Managing Life officially became
Yeah, it's when I left IBM and I actually started building a company.
It was day kind of,
Exactly. Yeah, it was the end of 2014. Raised a little bit of investment, kind of secured a development team. So back to your earlier point, my wife has been my biggest supporter and champion. And I would not be here today without her kind of constantly moving me forward and picking me up when it's been tough times, because there's a lot of tough times as a founder as well. So it was well said that you said that.
Let's hope she's listening to this, or
I know. I should do it.
I'll make sure I send her a direct link on your behalf. Yeah, that way it won't look so obvious.
For sure.
We'll edit this part out. And what's interesting is, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but almost what you described, where you're in that prototype mode, 2011-ish, and then to 2014. And you've created a product, but there's, I think a lot of companies go through this life cycle where you have a product, but you don't have a company yet. And you'll hear this said sometimes, for people who watch Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, shows like that. And if you read business books, and it's hard to find a metric to define. But sometimes I think it could be, recurring revenue, it could be EBITDA, it could be all these different things that an investor would look at. But I think from a founder perspective, it comes down to that moment when you're all in, that moment when you have to almost that feeling in the pit of your stomach, oh my gosh, I'm really
this is real
on a limb here. And now it's do or die.
It's interesting that you said that, because I'm a naturally conservative person. I always have backup plans and alternate strategies. And when I left IBM and I pursued Managing Life, and to this day, I don't have a backup plan. This this is going to succeed. I think we have something here. I don't even allow myself to think alternatively.
Yeah,
now that could be reckless, but it's what has allowed me to keep pushing through some challenging times, and why we've been pretty successful, I think, up until this point.
I think that's like you have to think that way, and it's easier said than done.
For sure.
That's for sure. But every time, especially when you're in consulting and you're advising other companies, every hour you spend on someone else solving someone else's problem is another hour you're not spending on growing your company.
Right.
Right. And that's not to put down. It's necessary, I think. Not everyone can just cut the ties right away and say, I'm going to jump in and launch a startup overnight. You got to a certain point where you proved to yourself, where the market spoke to you and said, there's a need for this. So it's not like you were reckless about it. Right.
Yeah. And I recognize that I am in a very fortunate position that financially I was able to actually do this. Right. I recognize that not a lot of founders have the ability to still have support from another source. In my case, obviously, my partner, my wife. But make sure that you set out those milestones, those goals. You're not just jumping all in without doing your diligence and validation, and making sure that there's actually something there. You don't quit your job and your financial support and then try to explore to see what's out there. I think that, at least in my perspective, is more reckless and not what I did. Sorry.
Yeah, no. And I love you said that, because and that's the non-sexy part, to be honest with you. It's like, sometimes you got to do a year, 2 years of R&D, even though you're super excited, to prove it out and have the conversations and, bounce it off other people and do some prototyping and stuff like that, before it's really ready. And that's going to test, I think, your commitment, to actually launching it into the market and then taking that next step. And everyone's situation is different. I want to talk a little bit about the problem that you were trying to solve. So from what we've talked about so far, you identified that there wasn't a pain app out there, and for logging those milestones or those moments. And what's really interesting is that's up until Managing Life, it's really been left up to the patient, the person who's suffering, to articulate how they're feeling in a way that a medical professional or an insurance company, because there's lots of folks involved in this, even just their family members, can understand the extent of their pain and how that is affecting their life. And that's a very subjective thing to leave to a person. So you found a way to give them a tool to empower the patient. And these are just my words. This is what I'm picking up on. And so, you correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, but that's how I see it. You're really empowering the patient and giving them a tool to really kind of like, translate and kind of, I'm not sure what the phrase that it is that I'm looking for. And I almost like manifest their pain into something that is tangible. How would you put it?
That was really well said. So there's really two things that we offer people with chronic pain. Number one is the ability to record what they're feeling. So everything comes down to recording what you're feeling and what you're doing, and designed a way that's very simple and easy to understand. We have 7 different languages people can use, so it's very easy to do. But then what we do is we play back that information to highlight charts and graphs so people can understand patterns. So is my migraine getting worse when it's cloudy outside? Or is that cannabis helping me sleep? Is that oxycodone hurting my back or helping my back?
Yeah.
So it's very much an empowerment tool, as you described. I like to say it's like a bit for pain. So people feel a little bit more in control of their situation, independent of a doctor, independent of drugs. It is really just, here's my own situation. I understand it, that it's being played back to me, and there's certain insights I'm getting out of this tool. But the real reason people use our application is the communication aspect, which is we give people a voice. We give them the language, the vocabulary to explain what they're going through to their doctors so they can get the care that they need. Many times people with pain are dismissed. Your pain's in your head is still a common thing that people are told, or you're just depressed. or take this Tylenol and come back in 6 months, or there's nothing we can do. You just have to learn to live with it. These are all common things that you talk to someone with chronic pain, they've heard several times in their life.
Yeah.
And on the other part, being able to articulate that to their insurance company, whether it's a health insurer that is providing authorization for a surgery or an expensive device, whether it's a disability carrier that is paying your salary if you're on disability due to pain, or whether it's a workers' compensation organization that can't understand why you're not back at work after 2 weeks of that injury. And so this is a real need for people to tell their story, and they're in a constant struggle of validation, seeking validation.
Yeah.
They always feel like they're having to prove that they're in pain because, like I said earlier, there's no way to take a blood test for pain or an x-ray for pain.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that voice, I think, is really important in terms of what we give them.
That's well put. And of course it is, because, it's coming straight from the founder. So how would you say, let's get into the insurance application of this, and then maybe we can jump back to the user interface. But how is the insurance industry embracing this? What are they looking at this in a positive light, jumping on it, going, oh my gosh, where have you been?
It's really interesting because as I mentioned, I didn't set out to be an insurtech company. I wanted to help people manage their pain.
Yeah.
And then it took me years to figure out what is the right business model. If you can help people manage their pain, who benefits? And it was really difficult. And so that's what pointed us in the direction of disability, because I started doing a lot of research on what is the cost of chronic pain and where did those dollars flow from? And it came down to 3 buckets. It was employers who were losing their employees due to chronic pain. They were taking time off work. So absenteeism was a big driver of cost. It's the number one reason people take time off work due to medical illness after the common cold and I guess COVID. So that was one bucket of cost. The second bucket of cost was health insurers. So here in Canada, the health insurer that I'm talking about is OHIP here in Ontario, or every province has their own public plan. But in the US, these are all private insurers. And so anytime you go to the doctor, anytime you go to the emergency room, anytime you get a drug filled, that's coming out of your health insurer. And chronic pain is the biggest driver of healthcare expenditures from a chronic disease perspective. It's more than diabetes, more than cancer, more than heart disease. And so naturally, it's a priority area for health insurers. And the third one that was really surprising to me until I really started digging into it was about 30 to 40% of your typical disability portfolio is due to chronic pain. So that's short-term and long-term disability. So disability is a benefit you typically get from your employer or you self-insure. When you have a medical illness that prevents you from working for longer than 2 weeks, you get disability benefits. They cover a percentage of your salary until you're functional enough to return. And in some cases, you're on disability until you're retired. And so every month that you're on disability costs that disability carrier thousands of dollars. So even if they can get you back to work half a month sooner, that's a huge savings for them. So that's where I saw that there was a financial incentive to manage pain. It wasn't with the pain doctors. It wasn't with the pain clinics. It wasn't with the hospitals. Right. And we really can't sell apps to people in pain. That wasn't really what I was trying to do. I wanted to make sure it was free of charge for them.
No, that's great. And so do you want to know what are the questions that come into my mind is, why do you think insurers didn't develop this technology? Why didn't they think of this years and years ago? This is their business after all.
Maybe. So I would say that each of those 3 segments, I'll talk about disability and workers' comp.
Yeah.
Even to this day, almost every single insurance company that I talk to that insures for disability or workers' comp leads by saying, we do not get involved in healthcare. We do not want to direct care. Fair enough. They're not supposed to be involved. Okay. But that doesn't mean you can't pay for tools that people can benefit from.
Right.
And so I think their mindset is now shifting to say that they may have a way to influence the outcomes and the disability or claim durations without actually getting involved in healthcare itself.
Yeah.
And that's new. that's like in the past 1 or 2 years. That
seems logical to me.
That's what I thought. And some disability carriers are less involved. They're more administrative. So show to me that you're going to the doctor, check. Show to me that you have your coverage, check. here's your monthly benefit. So they are purely administrative. And I think that role is now shifting where they want to be more active and help people get the care that they need so they can get it back to work.
Yeah, that's very well put. And because like it's that traditional approach to indemnification. I'm here because we have a contract. You pay me a premium. If you have a loss, I indemnify you. And financially, you should be whole and back into your pre-loss condition. However, that's really hard to tell someone who is suffering with chronic pain, who probably isn't really. I'm sure finances are a concern, because your ability to earn an income is actually your greatest asset, not your home or your car. But I think first priority for most people in chronic pain is like, I just want the pain to get better,
to go away. I don't want to be in pain.
Go away, or have someone help me manage the pain and understand that I'm legitimately in pain here, and I just don't know how to articulate that in a way to convince you. How did you come up with the name Managing Life?
Initially, I knew that I wanted to bring data to improve pain management, but at that time, I didn't know if this model could be extended to other chronic conditions. So I wanted to keep the name generic enough that allowed for that flexibility. And it actually was a name change. We had a very bad name to begin with. It was actually called Life Control Software, which doesn't have the same ring to it as Managing Life, right?
Sounds like a Microsoft product or something.
I know, right? Just didn't have the same ring. But our product is called Manage My Pain. It's self-explanatory. So when you search for pain on the App Store, we're the first app that pops up. And I want people to be able to easily find us.
Yeah. And so they can find through Apple and Android?
That's correct. Yeah.
Available on both platforms? That's fantastic. How many, can I ask, how many downloads? What was your record so far?
Well, just this week, I haven't told anyone this, but we hit our 2 million record milestone. So 2 million entries in our system. So I'm really, really proud about that. And why that's exciting for us is because we are the world's largest, as far as I understand, the world's largest repository of patient-reported pain information. So it's a very unique data set. And I think I'd mentioned earlier, I'm a data guy. And so the direction for us as a company is to use this data that people are entering into our system to help predict behaviors, to help align people to the right treatment plans, and use machine learning to do that. And so that's not really been done before in the world of pain. Very
cool. So before, just to clear something up, before we announced that you were doing this podcast interview, you had 1 million downloads and then it shot up to 2 million. Is that right? Shameless plug there. Sorry.
I think it was about a year ago that we were at 1.3 million. So it's almost 100% year-over-year growth. Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm so happy for you. So happy to hear that. Let's talk a bit about the user experience then. So if I download your app, what can I expect? Just kind of short form.
Yeah, for sure. So if you are referred to our application from an insurance company that we work with, or a pain clinic that we work with, they will typically direct you to a specific landing page where you provide your name, your claim number, your policy number, and then you're shown a consent screen. Now, this consent screen asks you, do you want to share your information? Do you provide Managing Life with permission to share your information with your carrier? It's always optional. We would never mandate that.
That's good.
Everyone's information, we keep privacy and the protection of one's data really core to our company. We never share data unless you provide explicit consent to do so. We protect it. In fact, there's a completely offline mode of our app where no data ever leaves the device if you choose to do it that way as well. So we take it very, very seriously. But if you choose to share it, and I will say that at RBC Insurance, one of the disability carriers that we work with, one of the statistics that was really surprising for us is that 94% of the disability clients chose to share their data with RBC.
Amazing.
They really wanted help, as you said earlier. If you're able to help me, here's what I'm going through. There's nothing to hide. Please help me. Here's what I'm going through. Tell me what other tools you have or what other recommendations you have, because I'm so desperate to get my pain managed. So that was an interesting finding for us. So once you register, you create an account, you go to the App Store, you download the free version of the app, and you create an account. And it's a two-step process to set up. We ask you what type of pain conditions you have and what medications you're on. Optional questions. And we just use that to personalize the situation when you log in. And it is very simple. We found that minimalism is the best opportunity for us. So there's one slider and it says, what is your pain right now? From 0 to 10. That's it. And you mark it down and then you actually answer 7 other questions. Where does it hurt? And it's a pre-selected checklist of like different locations on the body. You can add your own personal locations. What words you use to describe it. So tingling and dull versus electric shocks or numbing. These are all different adjectives people use to describe it. And they all have clinical relevance depending on what you use. What made your pain better? What made your pain worse? What medications did you take? And what other things besides medication did you try? Did you try meditation or stretching? And you mark down whether that was effective. So the whole design principle is that it takes less than 60 seconds to enter this information.
Wow.
On average, it's 45 seconds. Now that's the first entry, but at 8 p.m. every day thereafter, we don't ask you about your pain. Instead, we ask you what you did in your day that was important to you. We force you to actually reflect on the positive accomplishments and achievements in your life. And I think that's really difficult for someone with pain to appreciate, that pain has not consumed them entirely. There is still joy that they can get, and to really focus on those wins in your life. And that is a subtle psychological shift that our app is able to provide. Is, it's not just pain. It is positivity, accomplishments. Then we ask people about their pain once they're in that mindset. And the longer you use it, the more information and the more powerful the results of the application, because we play back that information through charts and graphs, as I described earlier. So now people can see visually in like calendar formats or charts or line graphs what the patterns are in relationships in their pain, so that they can actually take some action.
Yeah, that's really phenomenal. So I imagine, and I'm not a medical professional, but I imagine the insurance community and perhaps even the users that download your app would want to know there's some science behind this, other than just data aggregation and data analytics. So AI models, all the rest of that. From a medical clinical study standpoint, so how do I know that, how do I have confidence that, this actually has some sort of legitimacy from a clinical study or medical standpoint?
I'm glad you asked that, because there's a lot of apps out there. There's a lot of digital health companies that make all sorts of fantastical claims. I remember reading a report that looked at the top 1,000 mental health apps, and only 2% actually had any clinical evidence.
Wow.
It was essential for us as a company to actually build something that was based on clinical evidence. So we partnered with Canada's largest hospital, University Health Network, back in 2015. And everything that we've been building since then has been in conjunction with their multidisciplinary pain clinic. We've actually published 10 publications so far of our solution in various formats, whether it's the data we collect, the ability to engage people, how it was developed, that daily reflection concept that I had talked about. All of that is in peer-reviewed publications. The biggest milestone, however, we've achieved was actually just this past March. So after a 2.5-year study that was funded by the Ministry of Health here in Ontario, we got the results of a clinical study that used our solution at 3 different chronic pain clinics in Ontario. The Toronto General, Toronto Western Hospital, which are urban academic hospitals. But then we included Iroquois Falls Family Health Team. So Iroquois Falls is a tiny town of 4,500 people, 11 hours north of Toronto. And they service a large number of First Nation communities. And they're the only clinic in like a 3-hour radius. So vastly different demographic than downtown Toronto. And the researchers at St. Michael's Hospital found that people who used Manage My Pain and received care from these chronic pain clinics, compared to the same group of people, similarly matched group of people who didn't use our pain app, but got the same care at the clinics, the people who used the app had clinically and statistically significant improvements. And so that's a big milestone, because it makes ours the world's first and only digital solution for chronic pain that has clinical validation. And that is a huge milestone for us as a company. It's why insurance companies talk to us.
That's powerful. That's, that should attract not just the insurance community, but again, anybody who's in need. Because I'm sure there's still, even if I'm a person in the US and, we have public health care here in Canada,
Yeah.
but, and I don't have private insurance, but I still need help, knowing that that's got the science, the peer-reviewed studies behind it. That's really important. And I think just even the 2% statistic you shared would probably be surprising to a lot of people. I didn't know that. And most people, probably don't have time to do their homework. So I would say if anybody was interested enough to look at some of the peer-reviewed publications, are those available?
Yeah, absolutely.
Online or anything? Yeah. Okay.
Managinglife.com/research. All of our publications are listed there. It's very much front and center to what we do.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And I'm highlighting that because I think it's an important point. So I'm glad you got a chance to talk about that. So as far as where the company is at in its stage, you've been, out on the, market since 2014, building your customer base, your market share. You've got these peer review studies happening and you're doing various things with the insurance community. Are you in Canada and the US?
Yeah, so this was the first. This year was the first time we got a deal with our with a U.S. health plan. It's a very large Medicare Advantage plan. Can't disclose who it is, but it was a direct result of our clinical validation study. So as of now, we are finally in Canada and the U.S. with insurance companies.
That's amazing. And are you currently raising funds? Are you seed to Series A? Are you past that? Where are you at in that journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. I like to call us at kind of a post-seed stage, if you will, because we've got clinical validation, we've got users, we've got fantastic customers like RBC Insurance as a customer of ours, but we're not at that Series A mark yet, especially because Series A milestones have gone a little bit crazy the most recently, especially over the pandemic. There's another chronic pain company that has a virtual reality system, and their Series A was 29 million US. So they've kind of grown in size from a funding perspective.
That's an incredible mountain for anyone to climb. And, I want to put it out there as a call to action. And I'm pretty confident on these stats based on the source I was given. I think there's only a dozen venture capital or venture funds in Canada right now that are doing anything serious in the seed to Series A space. So the message there is there's a shortage and everyone wants to play it safe. And there's lots of capital if you're a Series B company, but how do you get there? How do you ever get there? And, it's not always, you don't always have to have the outside investor community behind you, but you can bootstrap. That's an option. And, build the company slowly and, accumulate enough capital to be self-funded, or you can do what a lot of Canadian companies do and go south and disappear. And, there's a lot of talk around the brain drain in Canada and a lot of companies. And this is not exclusive to the insurance industry or insurtech. This happens in other industries too. But I think it was especially in tech. And I try to bring that up as much as possible in these discussions. That it is possible to be successful in Canada and to stay in Canada and then to grow into other markets. But there's definitely a call to action to the private investor community because institutional lenders, they have their gates, their KPIs, and a lot of, they're not crazy about getting behind startup companies. And, especially with a tech company, you need resources and capital to scale to a certain extent. So would you say that has been one of your biggest challenges? If you were to name a challenge?
Without a doubt. It's also the part I hate most about the startup world is raising funds. But I think you kind of hit it bang on. Not only is there I think a shortage of seed to Series A stage capital, Digital health, which is a subset of that, is even more rare to find funds that will fund at that stage in Canada. There's a handful. And it is a pretty new industry to begin with, and there haven't been a lot of exits in Canada. But now we're starting to see some IPOs. MindBeacon IPO'd in December, Think Research last year, Newtopia. These are all companies in Canada in the healthcare space and the technology space that have gone public. And I think now we're starting to see a little bit more stronger interest in terms of what Canada is bringing to the table from a digital health perspective, which is where we focus. But to your point, all of the VCs I'm talking to are an American right now.
Yeah, and that's often the case. You can go around the belt pretty quickly in Canada, and then you got to knock on new doors. When we talk about digital health funding, though, interestingly enough, we're in this. We're apparently, according to some, the envy of the world because of our public healthcare system. So, what about government support? Is there strong subsidies out there for people in the digital healthcare space that you've experienced?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to say we wouldn't be able to make it this far if we didn't have the government support we've had.
Okay.
I am a huge advocate in both the provincial and federal funding sources for digital health. Okay. Half of the money that we brought into the company has been from provincial and federal grants. It's what's funded our clinical trials. It's what's funded our adoption at the various chronic pain clinics that I'd mentioned. It's what's funding another deployment in Alberta, hopefully soon. And so, yeah, without a doubt, the government has definitely met their end of the bargain in terms of helping move things forward. So I think the opportunity now is for our private capital to come in.
To step forward, which I think is a great combination when there's private-public collaboration that happens. And so the public funding, was that something you discovered and researched on your own, or are there any experts that have helped you along the way that you would if someone else was getting into the space?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to the earlier conversation. By being involved in those accelerators and talking to other founders, you learn about new opportunities. We also have a very strong relationship with the University Health Network, and they are an academic hospital. So they have that credibility, and they have that source of grant funding opportunities that we partnered with. And there's this whole subset of grants that talk about digital health innovation that a clinician can't apply on their own. They need technology, and a tech company can't do it without a clinician. So it is a natural fit for industry like us to partner with healthcare providers for these types of grants and actually get something innovative. That's how essentially we've been able to get to where we are today.
Okay. And are you your opportunity to put the message out there, because we are getting interest from the investor community on this podcast? Are you inviting the investor community to come forward? Are you in fundraising mode right now, or where are you as far as that stage is concerned?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're targeting a massive multi-billion-dollar market for chronic pain. Okay. And our customers are insurance companies that we've talked about. And we're currently raising a round. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about managing life and our growth journey, please reach out to me. And I'd love to talk.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And there's also, a lot of, not so much in Canada, it's growing, but there are venture funds that are attached to insurance companies. It's again more common in the States, and I'm sure you've done your rounds there. Any advice that you would give to fellow founders or people that are from outside of the industry or even inside that have been trucking along doing the same thing but have a great idea? What would you say to them if they were thinking about jumping in and starting something like you did back in 2014?
Yeah, it's I would say follow the money. So what I mean by that is, you think you're building a product to fit a need, but does that need cost anything? And if it does cost, who's paying for it? And talk to those people, because ultimately they're your customer. And if you start from your business model from the beginning, you're going to be able to build a better solution for that customer's problem. Now, I didn't take that journey. I talked to insurance companies last.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the right or wrong approach, but it did give us the credibility to talk to or get the clinical validation. It gave us the credibility to build a solution that people with chronic pain actually use. Then we ended up talking to our potential customers. So I didn't follow my own advice. Maybe I would do it a little bit differently if I had a do-over.
Okay, that's good advice though. I did want to take a chance or take an opportunity to talk about your recent award, because I mentioned earlier the People's Choice Award. What was that all about? How did you come out as the People's Choice winner in the InsurTech pitch competition?
Yeah, so InsurTech North Canada is a fantastic conference. I was an attendee in a previous conference, and then there was a selection process to be one of, I think it was 5 companies that pitched in front of what they call the Wolf Pack. It's a bunch of VCs or insurance executives that judge you on your pitch and ask questions, and they have a scoring mechanism to see which is the most exciting opportunity. And there were some fantastic companies that I pitched alongside. So kudos to the winner relay platform there.
Yeah.
But there was a secondary award, which was the Voters' Choice or People's Choice Award. So People's Choice Award. And I think there was 400 to 500 people in the conference, if I'm not mistaken, that were voting virtually for what they felt was the best company in the pitch contest. And I think we won. So thank you very much to everyone who voted for us. I think the reason we won is because chronic pain is real. Everyone has experienced it or knows someone in their life that has it. It resonates with people. And so seeing something tangible that can actually help is very powerful. And I think that's why people voted for us. A lot of our other companies that were in the pitch competition were pure InsurTech. They made the adjudication process simpler, or they help identify prospective customers, or they were InsurTech. And so healthcare has a little bit more of a personal touch. And so I think that's why we were able to differentiate a bit on that regard.
No, it's great validation that shows you're resonating with people. And for anybody who was at that conference, if you are a decision maker at life and health insurer, or you work with a venture fund or in private equity, reach out to Tahir. Like get off the seat and get on the phone, and we'll make sure there's a way to contact you at the end here. So
For sure.
So that you can get as much runway as possible from that experience. Kind of some closing thoughts here. When clients think about, the end user thinks about managing life, and I guess in your case, you could have like a 2-part answer on this one. Is what do you want users to say when they think of managing life? So what do you want to be known for from the end user? And then what do you want insurers to know you for?
Yeah, for people with pain, I want to be that essential tool that help them get the care they need. We run our company using Slack, and there's a channel dedicated to our reviews. And anytime someone leaves a review, we celebrate it. It's core to our business. When we can help people, that really keeps pushing us forward. So that's definitely what we want to do for our users, is be that helpful tool to get people the care or the management that they need. For insurers, we want to be known as the solution to lower the cost of chronic pain. Whether you're a disability carrier or workers' comp, shortening those claim durations, or if you're a health plan or a health insurer, reducing the medical spend associated with chronic pain. And I think we are the go-to digital solution for chronic pain that's highly scalable and is a order of magnitude cheaper than what you're probably traditionally doing to deal with this problem.
And you know what? I'm going to repeat a stat you said earlier. 90% of people suffering with chronic pain want to actually share that information with their insurance carrier because they want to get better. And actually, I heard, I hope I don't get myself into trouble here, but I heard someone bring up the fraud question because I did sit through your pitch at InsurTech North. And, it was a valid question, but I think the insurance industry is sometimes guilty of having a little bit of an unhealthy obsession with fraud. Even if fraud's going to be out there, there's always going to be some element of it. I don't think empowering people suffering with chronic pain is going to make fraud cases go through the roof exponentially. But for anybody who, because I believe it'll actually probably have the opposite effect. But for anybody out there who is wondering, because that is the thing that does cost insurance companies millions of dollars. Do you want to talk just a little bit about, some of the ways that you guys are able to help insurance companies overcome that concern?
Yeah, absolutely. So our solution is always positioned as something that helps people get the care that they need. And I believe that that's going to give the biggest ROI for insurance companies. If you get people the care that they need, manage their pain, that's going to give you huge returns. Now, you are going to have a very small segment of the population that is feigning or malingering, which is the term for, misrepresenting your situation. But you have that today. And so if you give them a tool like ours, which requires you to enter that information more regularly often, it's going to be easier to detect that, not harder. And it's going to make it harder to actually misrepresent your situation over and over and over and over again. Right. So I would argue that with a solution like ours, you're able to identify those outliers in a far better capacity. It doesn't replace your fraud investigation, your fraud process, but it would be a complement to what you're already doing.
Well said. Well said. If anybody wants to know more, what's the best way to find you or reach out to you?
Yeah, check out our website, managinglife.com. All of the research, all of our case studies, including the one at RBC, is available there. You can send me an email. My email address is thahir@managinglife.com. That's TAHIR @managinglife.com. It's not spelled phonetically in my name, so I like to spell it out. Or you can just send us an email via our website. I'd love to chat, hear your perspective. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about our solution and how it could help your organization, happy to give a demo as well. Or if you're interested in learning more from an investment perspective, please reach out and I can share more about our growth path.
Excellent. Yeah. So Tahir, pleasure sitting down with you today. Love your passion, not just for the company, but for the cause. And, I think this is near and dear, and the statistics prove it to a lot of people. I think we all know someone who is suffering from chronic pain. I just have a hard time believing that there hasn't been something. So thank you for, bringing not just a solution to the market that anyone can throw into an app store because they hired some developers, but going through the effort to have it peer reviewed and the clinical studies. And so you've got, the credibility behind that to support that, there's something very special here. And I think it does come out to a win-win for everybody that's involved. So I love to be able to talk about things like this that are really having not just a strong impact on the industry, but society in general. So thanks for sitting down with me today and for sharing with us and with me in the audience about what the special things you're doing at Managing Life.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, John, and having me on the show. It's been great.
Fantastic. Yeah, my pleasure as always. So